Beware Maria. Maria talks about music, about women, about spirituality, about hymns, about nature, about degrees. Maria talks about many things that can be related to each other. Maria finds it odd to talk about herself in the third person, and beware, you don't know what she's going to come up with today. But you can write to her at bewaremaria@gmail.com. Today we have with us the Reverend Professor June Boyce-Tillman, who is a prominent British academic who specialized in music, spirituality, and theology. June is Professor Emerita of Applied Music at the University of Winchester, and she also was ordained as a deacon of the Church of England and as a priest in 2007. Hello, June.
Hello, and I also am an extraordinary professor at the Northwest University in Potchefstroom in South Africa. And that's a position that I really love.
Yes, so I didn't have that with me. I see you have a huge academic work, a lot of publications, a lot of performances, a lot of compositions. You have been performing all over the world, and I see you've been doing one-woman show for a long time.
I have. Yes, I started my career teaching in primary schools in London because I wanted to explore how the music curriculum could be expanded. And with children between 7 and 11, you haven't got the constraint of exams, and we didn't have a national curriculum then. So I could explore what was interesting to me, which was how far children could compose and improvise. The model was that, in a sense, to be a composer, you needed to be old, German, male, deaf and dead. And I wanted to see whether children who were none of those things might be able to do that. So I taught in primary schools in London, and then I taught in a girls' grammar school in London, which enabled me to develop the work I'd done with younger children, with older children. And so that enabled me to carry on. And that was a beautiful school. It was an Anglican school, a Church of England school. And we could explore all of that, as well as having choirs and orchestras and being able to perform on television and things like this. It was the age of the sort of Peter, Paul and Mary, the folk group with guitars and a double bass and so on. And the girls were able to perform, to make those groups. It was before the electronic instruments came in. So I was experimenting then. And then when my children were born, I was able to look at babies and how they developed. But when I went to the University of Winchester, initially I was teaching music and education, where all my experience was then. But then I was in performing arts. And so the one-woman shows were born really out of being in the performing arts. And I asked myself what women might have done if they'd created musical forms. There are lots of musical forms, and I studied music at Oxford, and I learned how to write a symphony and a fugue and all the other classical musical forms. But of course, women didn't create those, because really the musical scene was dominated by men, or at least the literate musical scene was dominated by men. So I asked myself, what might women have created if they'd had a chance to create a form? And that's when the one-woman shows were created. Women in general, when they're talking with one another, are usually telling stories. And they tell stories often with quite a lot of emotion, often with quite a lot of hand movements and so on. And so I thought I would put together a storytelling which involved storytelling, song, and movement. Again, that was countercultural because I'm a big woman, and big women, and I was by then in my late 40s, and big women who are older are not supposed to perform. You're only supposed to perform when you're young and beautiful and all of those things, and thin. And so I looked at what my aging body by then could do. I was also working on Hildegard of Bingen, who was a Benedictine nun in the 12th century, 1098 to 1179. And people were asking me to talk about her. And I was going to Germany to the Abbey, which was close to the one that she founded. And I heard her saying to me, "Don't talk about me, be me." So the first woman whose story I told was Hildegard of Bingen. And I told it as a story. I wrote a set of piano pieces, which were reflections, musical reflections on what she wrote. And also I sang some of her music as part of it and so on. And I talked a little bit about her. When I moved to the next mystic who influenced me a great deal, who was 200 years after, there was Julian of Norwich, I started to integrate those elements together so that the story and the movement and so on. Where the movement came in, I often ended by asking people to join in a circle dance with me. So the other thing I did with the one-woman shows was to break down what's often called the fourth wall, the wall between the audience and the performer. So I didn't wear elaborate clothes. I often just put a scarf over the top of what I was doing, which I could change as part of the show. And then I would go out into the audience, but at the end, I'd ask everybody to join in a circle dance. So that barrier was broken down. I wouldn't use elaborate stage lighting. I wasn't on a stage, therefore I wouldn't use elaborate makeup. I would use ordinary clothes, which were decorated with things over the top of them. And so the one-woman show was born. Initially, I did the mystics, but then I started to tell the stories of my own life. So there was one called Juggling, a Question of Identity, of all the roles that I've played in my life. So, as a child who says, "Play with me," and there's a mother, and there's a lover who says, "I love you," and then there's a housewife who says, "Wash, cook, mend, clean," and then there's a teacher who says, I will teach you. And then there's the one I really like is the crone. She's the older woman, and she's discussing with her friend all the protests they used to do when they were young. And she says, "We used to protest, dear, didn't we? Now we just knit. Who are you knitting for?" And the other one says, "I'm knitting for Afghanistan." And this one says, "Well, I'm knitting for Zambia." And they say to one another, "Have another cup of tea." So from being other people, I started to tell bits of my story. And one of the last ones that I created was called Seeing in the Dark, where I combined my own story with the story of Jephthah's daughter in the Bible. So I often did they all had a spiritual dimension of some kind or other.
June, it calls my attention a lot that you seem to be saying, like at the beginning, there were a lot of barriers. It was not in the head of the people that a woman of a certain shape and age would be performing, but you found your way through it. Was it through conviction? How do you think you managed to break that and do it?
Well, I think it's a really interesting question. When I was 7, in something like the early 1950s, there was not the remotest chance I would bear the titles that you've just given to me, the Reverend and Professor, because women couldn't be ordained, and it was unlikely they would be in academe, and certainly rise through the ranks of academe to professorship. As my musical education progressed, although in the early stages there were pieces by women, by the end there were no pieces by women. And when I went to Oxford, there were no women teaching, no women in the curriculum. There were 36 men in my year and 3 women. So it became apparent, really, that women had no authority. So although I did the same course as the men, the role for a woman was to teach. It was not to do what many of the others did, conduct, compose, and so on. So, and that, I think, was why it was not till the middle of my life that I started to think really seriously about what women might have done. I did work quite hard already on trying to find women composers, and finding Hildegard of Bingen, who's the first notated European composer, changed the whole dilemma, because suddenly I'd found a woman who did compose and so on. So I think the desire to create something which was mine and not simply to do things like other people was born in the sort of struggle to find a degree of acceptance. And I think I decided I wouldn't struggle to find acceptance in the fields where men were, but create another field where they weren't.
And we're going to listen to two pieces by June. The first one, which is the first one?
The first piece that I'd like to play is called The Song of the Earth. Now, it was written a while ago. In fact, I'm trying to think when it was written. It was written probably in the late 20th century, or perhaps the early 21st century. But it's very relevant, really, for today. I mean, the choruses sing us our own song, the song of the earth, the song of creation, the song of our birth, that exists in belonging to you and to me, to the stars and the ocean, the sky and the sea. And so I've always been really interested in how we form relationships, and not only the relationships with other human beings, but the relationships with the natural world. And in a sense, we all come from the earth. And the commonality that we have is that we all come from the earth, and we've all been born of a woman. Mm-hmm. So if you want to bring people together, then we say, well, we're all born as human beings. But from that, in Hildegard's day, there was not the separation between us and the other than human world that there is now. And she already saw, as quantum physics sees now, that the whole world is in vibration. And so one of the verses in the middle of it, it is not one song, but patchworks of sound that includes all the pitches that people have found, that includes the vibrations of earthquakes and bees, the laughing fires crackling and murmuring breeze. So by singing the song of the earth, we're singing our song in relation to other human beings, but we're also singing in relation to the other than human world as well. And then it ends with that all blend together to make the earth song. And then a reflection of our own age, fragmented parts separated too long. In finding our true notes and colours and beats, we make sacred spaces where we all meet. And in a sense, that verse, in finding our true notes, I realised that the education system has basically been limited what people can do in it. There was a right way of singing, there was a right way of making music and all of that. But by doing the composing and improvising, I realized that there was a huge variety of ways that people wanted to make music. So finding our own true rhythms, the way in which we want to sing, accepting the tone color of our own particular voice, because there'll never be another voice like ours, because it's our particular body and its shape that makes the tone colors. So we need to be confident in our own bodies and so on. And by doing that, we make a sacred space with other people and with the natural world. And really, although it was written a long time ago, I think it's more relevant now than it was even when I wrote it.
Okay, so let's have a listen to it.
Sing us our own song, the song of the earth, the song of creation, the song of our birth, that exists in belonging to you and to me, to the stars and the mountains, the sky and the sea. Listen, you're hearing the song of the earth. They sing it who know of their value and worth, for they know they belong with the sea and the sky, to the moonshine at midnight, the clouds floating by. Sing us our own song, the song of the earth, the song of creation, the song of our birth, that exists in belonging to you and to me, to the stars and the mountains, the sky and the sea. It is not one song, but patchworks of sound that includes all the pitches that people have found, air that includes the vibrations of earthquakes and bees, of the laughing fast crackling and murmuring bees. Sing us our own song, the song of the earth, the song of creation, the song of our birth, that exists in belonging to you and to me, to the stars and the mountains, the sky and the sea, all blend together to make the earth song, fragmented parts separated too long. True notes and rhythms and colours and beat make sacred spaces where we all meet. Sing us our own song, the song of the earth, the song of creation, the song of our birth, that exists in belonging to you and to me, to the stars and the mountains, the sky and the sea. Sing us our own song, the song of the earth, our birth.
I always wonder why it is a master's degree and not a mistress degree, if you can be a choir mistress and a head mistress in a school.
Yes, but mistress, you see, the snag is with all of these things that mistress has acquired overtones, which master has not. So one of the meanings of mistress is, a woman who's having a relationship outside of marriage. So it's got coloured by other things. On the other hand, I do hold a master's degree from Oxford, an MA, and I do hold a bachelor's degree, both of which are male titles. Yeah. But you will notice that when I gave my professorship, some women call themselves Professor Emeritus, but I stick with Professor Emerita, which is the feminine form of it. And that's why we don't use the word mistress.
Yeah. Okay. So
we don't actually use headmistress now.
We don't say headmistress anymore.
We tend to use head teacher.
What about the spiritual side? Because you entered as a deacon and then as a priest. Why a priest and not a priestess of the Church of England?
Well, it's exactly the same problem, really. That priestess became associated with the worship of a female goddess, and also often sometimes with witchcraft of some kind or other. So it acquired a meaning which was something other than the male priest. And that's why women took the title priest rather than priestess. The route into it was hard. I wanted to be a priest really from the moment that I was in church. I was brought up in a Church of England family in the country, in the countryside, in the New Forest. And I think as soon as I was able to watch the priest, I would like to have been one. But there was not the remotest chance then that a woman would be ordained. I wasn't even allowed to sing in the choir, because even though when they wanted someone to sing, "Oh, Jesus, I Have Promised," and they tested lots of people, I was chosen as the one who could sing it best. I wasn't allowed to sing it in church because only boys sang in church, not girls. So there were lots of prohibitions on what women and girls could do. And I worked extremely hard for the ordination of women in the Church of England, and for that matter, in the Roman Catholic Church, and that hasn't happened yet. But so there were lots of, in the middle of my life, lots and lots of alternative worshipping groups where women were meeting to make their own liturgies and to discuss how we might get women ordained. And we went out with placards, around cathedrals and all sorts of things like this, saying that women should be, wrote lots of books. I edited hymn books, concentrating on the contribution of women, and also calling God mother or midwife, and so on. So using feminine images. In the middle of my life, because when I got quite ill during the breakdown of the marriage and all sorts of other things, I went away from the Christian tradition into what would be broadly called the New Age, and learned a lot of tradition, like shamanic traditions. So journeying on the drum, trance-like traditions.
Yes, that I have witnessed. Yes, I have.
And learned a lot of those techniques because they were used to heal me, and they did heal me of things that conventional medicine had said could not be healed. I then did go and stay with people like the Mi'kmaq people in Newfoundland and carry on looking at those traditions there. And I might have gone on in that route spiritually. There was still a foothold in the Anglican Church as well, but I might have gone down that route. But I was thinking really that when you look at the musical healers in those traditions, they were the so-called medicine people, and there were men and women. So it wasn't as exclusively male as the church was. I would, in general, in this culture, in the English culture, have been able to see often middle-aged women who had some money who could pay me. Whereas the equivalent, I thought, in the English culture was really the Church of England priest, who was the person who was in charge of a parish. And if people wanted a funeral or a wedding, all of those things, that's where they went. They also went for advice, they went for comfort, and it was done for free, and so on. So the person who was the equivalent, really, of the medicine person in some of the other traditions was really the Anglican priest. At the point where women were ordained, they agreed to ordain women. I was going through a divorce, and I certainly couldn't have done anything there at that point. But after quite a lot of internal struggles, really, I decided that I would put myself forward. And that was quite difficult because the course is designed really for people who haven't had a lot of experience. Well, in general, it's designed for men in their 20s. And it's quite difficult for a mature woman with a lot of experience and a lot of a range of wisdoms to get through it. I was a staunch feminist by then, with very liberal views on gender, sexuality, and all of that made it difficult to go through. I'm glad I went through it, but I think I'm not as traditional a priest as some people might be.
Is there a place for spirituality in people who are not openly religious or don't believe in afterlife? What is there a concept of spirituality in the 21st century that it's more inclusive of anyone else who?
Well, I think my experience in the New Age helped a great deal, really, because in a sense, the beginning of the decline of Christianity started with Nietzsche, the 19th century, saying God is dead. But what Nietzsche also said is that we shall miss him. So I think there has been a hole in Western society where God was, which people are trying to fill in various ways. And the ways in my book, Experiencing Music and Restoring the Spiritual, I explored several ways in which people find their spiritual home. Some is by a transcendent being of some kind or other, call that God or Kali or creative force, and so on, any of those. Some people find it largely in their relationship with nature, in the energy of trees and so on. Some people find it in their relationships with other people, forming communities of some kind or other. Some people find it in themselves, the experience of conversion or visionary experiences, that sort of area. Some people find it in ethical practice like fair trade and justice in general, on a world scale and a national and a personal scale. And those people would call themselves spiritual but not religious, and will often have combined a number of those things together. The people who still retained a link with a faith tradition of some kind or other, whether that's the story of a great faith leader like Jesus or Buddha or Muhammad, or that they retain some of the traditions of it. So they practice Zen meditation, or they like going to a choral service, even if the belief system isn't theirs. So those people will call themselves spiritual and religious. But there is a huge variety of spiritualities out there now. And in general, people are making their own sense of meaning from putting a lot of things together. So you've got sort of people with a mixture of tarot cards, favorite hymns, and a bit of mindfulness.
Yeah. June, I would love to play the second piece that we have for today. And would you like to tell us about it?
Well, this piece is starts, "We shall go out with hope of resurrection." And it was written originally before women were ordained. And it was about, and I thank you, Maria, for inviting me on this. It's about hearing the stories of those people whose stories in general haven't been told. We shall go out with hope of resurrection. We shall go out from strength to strength, go on. We shall go out and tell our stories boldly, tales of a love that will not let us go. And then we'll sing our songs of wrongs that can be righted and dream our dreams of hurts that can be healed. We'll weave a cloth of all the world united within the vision of a Christ who sets us free. So the notion that in the end, everybody and everything is included in a vision. And our task is to make right relationship with everything. And that is an ongoing struggle, because as soon as we've made right relationship with one bit, another bit falls apart. So the creation story, which in Christianity is situated in Genesis, is not a one-off. It's a constant activity of creating and recreating, rebirthing and birthing. And it's not by accident. And in the last song you played, that the image was birth, because women haven't had a significant hand in creating culture. And so birth has often been ignored and death has been highlighted. So the notion of birthing, continually birthing creation, not only children, but birthing right relationship, is something that women can add to that. They know the struggles of birthing, the pain of birthing, and so on. And some of these, the problems in our fragmented society are difficult to heal, like the one between rich and poor, apart from issues of gender and ethnicity, sexuality and disability and all the other things that we could highlight. But the last line, which I really love, is the we'll weave a cloth of all the world united, including all within the circles of our love. And so that notion that we're working for a totally inclusive society where we and, you know, the fox who lives in my garden, not to mention the spider who's just sitting outside of my window at this precise moment, not to mention the trees, are all in right relationship. And that's the dream. And the old Archbishop of York, John Sentamu, included it in many of his services because he said it was the only hymn that ended with including all within the circles of our love. And that was his dream too. So that's what we're going to sing.
So this is it for today. We're going to leave you with listening of this piece. Thank you very much, June Boyce-Tillman, for being here today. And till I see you again.
I shall look forward to it.
We shall go out with hope of resurrection. We shall go out from strength to strength, go on. We shall go out and tell our stories boldly, tales of a love that will not let us go. We'll sing our songs of wrongs that can be righted. We'll dream our dreams of hurts that can be healed. We'll weave a cloth of all the world united within the vision of a Christ who sets us free. We'll give a voice to those who have not spoken. We'll find the words for those whose lips are sealed. We'll make the tunes for those who sing no longer, vibrating love alive in every heart. We'll share our joy with those who are still weeping, chant hymns of strength for hearts that break in grief. We'll leap and dance the resurrection story, including all within the circles of our love.